Hello and welcome to the show. So I am a very big fan of the Autocross in Forza 5. I can spend many more hours than I probably should doing the Autocross rival events because I love the precision of this. It's very different to what I normally do on Forza 5. You know, your normal circuit racing, your normal track racing or hot lapping or whatever. Of course, you still got to have great car control for this, but it's all about sort of very, very fine precision to get around these courses quickly. Sure, you do still need speed to get around these, but it's more about the precision. You know, you very rarely get much above 100 miles an hour in these. It's all about the very, very sort of tight car control. I find it incredibly addicting trying to get that perfect run. I've spent many an hour messing around. Now, the cars that tend to do well in this are the likes of your Caterhams, your Lotuses. The KTM Crossbow can be quite high up in the leaderboards. Your general track day cars. My A-class vehicle of choice, the Ferrari 360 Challenge, is also very good at Autocross. You need a car that is very, very good handling, can change direction very quickly, has very, very good brakes, and also a car that's very stable. You know, you start sliding around during Autocross, you're going to either lose a hell of a lot of time or you're going to start knocking over cones or barrels, whatever you want to call them. So you need a very good car to go quickly at Autocross, and it's all about the handling. Straight line speed is not important. Acceleration is fairly important, sort of burst of acceleration in between the barrels, but your straight line speed is irrelevant, pretty much, when it comes to this. If we move up to S-Class, the Formula Ford here would be a pretty damn sensible choice. It's small, it's lightweight, it's incredibly agile. In fact, I think this is one of the lightest cars in Forza 5, 1,069 pounds. That's all it weighs. That's not very much at all. 213 horsepower, 211 torque, not massively quick at a straight line as you would expect, but it's got slick tyres, it's got aero parts on it. Very, very good handling vehicle. It is possible to get it perhaps a little bit out of shape. I didn't quite want it to be going silent. That's about the only place I could have got away with that in the Formula Ford. I mean, it's still possible to mess up with this car. It's still possible to be a little overzealous with the accelerator pedal, but in general this is a very good choice of car when it comes to Autocross. However, it does start off as a fairly low S-Class car, 720 PI towards the bottom of S, and I kept this vehicle completely standard for this run. This is being run with a completely stock Formula Ford because I was interested to see how quickly this car could go around this track, because I wanted to test some rather inappropriate Autocross cars. I was going to take my silly build cars and take them around the same course. Now, the Formula Ford is S-Class, and this Rivals event is also for S-Class cars only, so I am using the silly car builds that have ended up in S-Class. Up first was the almighty wing, my Bentley Continental Gt Speed, it's got the most spectacular rear wing of all time, really. This is not a good Autocross car. It has 1,000 horsepower. In fact, it has over 1,000 horsepower. It weighs 3,800 pounds, almost 4 times the weight of the Formula Ford. Well over 4 times the power. It is very long. It is very wide. It doesn't stop quite as nicely as I would like. It's not an agile car, the Bentley. It's not a bad car to drive. This is nowhere near as difficult to drive as I thought it would be when I built it for the silly car build. However, it's not designed, it's not meant to cope with this sort of course. I mean, this section under the bridge, I wondered if the Bentley would fit through the coat. It's incredibly narrow through there. I mean, this is a huge car. I'm asking it to do quite a ridiculous thing, but the Bentley was doing okay. You know, it did a little bit better than I expected it to, actually. It is difficult to drive around this course. I mean, you've got to be so unbelievably careful with the throttle. All the cars here are being driven with no assist, manual and clutch, simulation steering. You've got to be so careful when you've got 1,000 horsepower. But the Bentley could deal with it. It wasn't too bad at putting all of that power down. The Renault Clio V8 that I have here is perhaps a little bit more sensible of a choice for Autocross car. At least the standard Clio would be more sensible as a choice. In S-Class, this one has 917 horsepower from a Ferrari 458 Italia engine. It is quite a big power to weight ratio in this car. It is also a very short wheelbase, good for darting in and out of bollards. Bad for twitchiness. When you start putting this much power in a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car with a short wheelbase, the Clio V6 can be twitchy. It can be a bit of a difficult car to drive when you're dealing with this much power in it. In fact, standard it can be quite understeering. But when you start putting this much power into the Clio, it becomes very difficult to sort of keep it under control. There is an element of this track is so slow in some respects. You very rarely, like a corner speed is very rarely above 50 miles an hour. You don't have the really big oversteery slidey moments, you don't have the really big twitchy scary moments that you would get on this track if you were driving it normally, let's say. But you've got, it's the sort of the throttle control in between these corners that is so vital. You can't have the car burst into wheel spin halfway through a corner. You just can't, otherwise you will clonk a barrel with the back of your car because you just don't have any room. The Clio is a smaller car and that certainly works for it. It is certainly nicer to drive. It's easier to drive, easier to weave in and out of the cones with a car the size of the Clio. I was quite nervous about running this. This is the slidey Toyota Celica that I spent 4 laps going sideways around Road America with this vehicle. I was quite nervous about taking this on an autocross course. It's certainly not the most powerful car. That's 770 something, I think, around about that. Can't remember. It's certainly not the most powerful car that we have here, but it just wanted to slide. All this car wanted to do at Road America was go sideways. And yes, again, it can be a little bit oversteery around this course. Much like I said with the Clio, you never go that fast through the corners. You're never doing medium speed corners. All of these are sort of like the toughest hairpins you will find on a track. You've got to bring the cars down to that kind of speed. So the oversteer in the Celica isn't that bad. You know, I never really had a problem with this car sort of massively trying to step out on you any more than the other vehicles. You know, your big thing in this is the power delivery, getting all of that power down onto the road and the changing of directions. And the Celica is a fairly small, fairly light car, so its weaving in and out of the bollards wasn't too bad. It really wasn't terrible. Not as bad as I expected it. And putting the power down, well, all the cars are in the same boat with this. All of them, I'm trying to put down far too much power through very tight corners. The Celica was the more oversteery car, one of the most oversteery cars, as I expected. So yes, it was a little bit difficult to drive, but certainly not as bad as I had perhaps feared. Now, the Chevrolet Impala, when I drove this in the City car build, was actually a very good vehicle. This is possibly one of the biggest surprises I've had with a city car build. This is 1,000, or near enough 1,000 horsepower Chevrolet Impala. It has a NASCAR engine in it. It is pretty damn powerful. It is also pretty damn huge as well. Certainly a comparable size with the Bentley. Yet this is a very good car to drive. This one, I think there is some magic at work to make this car hold onto the road as well as it does. It has huge amounts of grip, very good traction. For the amount of power you are getting from this car, it's not particularly heavy either. You can really deliver it very well. It's a very manageable car, this one. It is a big vehicle. It doesn't feel particularly big. Again, I'm not sure quite how this works, but the Impala feels surprisingly agile, weaving in and out of the bollards. It changes direction very well. There is so much grip in this car, but it is long. You have to be careful with a vehicle of this size. You know, it's probably twice the length of the Clio, perhaps. You have to be pretty careful. You got to leave more margin with this car through some of the change of directions. But yeah, it's got a lot of grip. It's got a lot more grip than I expected. You know, it's a 1,000 horsepower car. It will wheel spin pretty damn easily if you aren't careful. So again, yeah, throttle control is very important with this, but it's perhaps one of the most forgiving of the cars. I didn't expect to be saying that, but to be honest, I think it probably is. Our next vehicle is certainly the loudest car that we have here, a quad-rotor Mazda RX-7. Sorry. This is perhaps, in some ways, a little unspectacular. I'll be honest. It's quite unfair in some respects. 718 horsepower, sorry, RX-7 with the engine from what I presume is a 787B is the least spectacular. Not in noise terms, it's a fantastic sounding engine, but there wasn't any sort of massively noticeable characteristics aside from the fact that, yeah, it's a powerful car, it'll spin the wheels up. It is fairly small. It's not the smallest car that we had here. It's not the lightest, but it is kind of fairly light. Agility-wise, it's pretty good at the change of direction. I think that the big thing with this is you've got to be careful. The power does like to come all at once with the with the quad rotor engine. It is a fairly ferocious power delivery on this car. But yeah, the RX-7, it wasn't bad. I wouldn't say it was bad. It wasn't massively hard to control. It wasn't the easiest car. It was sort of just around the middle, really kind of average. Yeah, that's unfair on this car. It is quite a remarkable vehicle when you compare it to anything else. But amongst the silly cars, it did sort of sit in the slightly average category, a little bit sideways coming into these final corners. I tried to get as much speed out of it as I could. Again, a little bit of sideways moments here and there. And next car is the Ferrari 375. This was the vehicle I was most scared of, to be honest. I was thinking this was going to be a real pain. This is one of the most oversteery vehicles I've ever driven. It's incredibly hard to drive around a normal track. It's not got a huge amount of power. I think about 570-ish horsepower in this car. Where is it? 590, I lied. It's the least powerful vehicle we've got here. Not very often you say that about a car with 595 horsepower. But it just doesn't have any rear end grip. This thing slides around like mad. I really struggle with it at Sebring. I wouldn't want to have driven this at Road America, where there's a lot faster corners. I think it would have been even harder to drive around there. However, it is yet again a similar story to the Celica, really, at this track. You're never going fast enough for it to ever have a really big problem. The main concern with this car is just putting the power down out of the corners, stopping the wheels spin up from all of these first gear and second gear slow turns. You've not got that oversteer problem that much anyway, because you're just not going fast enough. Of all the cars, yes, this was the hardest to drive, no doubt about it. It was the hardest of these vehicles, because it does not take very much at all to get the back end of this car sliding. You'll notice it a few points on this run. The back end is incredibly lively in the Ferrari. It takes just a millisecond of sort of misconcentration, if you like. Tiny too much throttle and it will have problems. But because you're never going fast enough, you know, the problems aren't as big as you get if lapping this circuit normally. We have the first ever city car build, in fact, on this. This was an S-Class car, the Fiat X1-9. In fact, this was not quite a proper city car build, in that I didn't fully modify it. I ended up modifying it to S-Class. But it's here, it's in S-Class. I thought I would give it a go. It's another very small, fairly light, not quite as light as I expected it to be, actually. 2,100 pounds, despite the fact it is probably the smallest car here. It's yeah, well, I say a little bit heavier. It's still an incredibly light vehicle, but I thought it would have been under 2,000 pounds. This car, 770 horsepower. So yeah, you got quite a big power to weight ratio in this one. This was quite a nice car to drive, actually. When I drove it the first time, it was ridiculously hard to control. I've definitely got better since that, or I've driven a lot worse cars. I think it's a combination of the two of them. Being such a small car, you know, through some of the narrower sections, you know, it could be quick. It could be quicker through the narrow section. It could change direction, probably the best of any car here. It was very good through this fast section. I almost got it wrong. I almost went the wrong side of the bollards there. Just about managed to correct it in time. It's a powerful car. Again, it'll slide if you push it, and I do get things a little bit wrong. I tried to carry a bit too much speed through there. I managed to gather it all up though, and keep things together as the Fiat crosses the line. And our final car for today. This is a brute of a car. The heaviest vehicle we have here, 4,200 pounds. 4 times the weight of the Formula Ford. All of these vehicles are higher PIs than the Formula Ford. This Rolls-Royce, again, is another car that is completely inappropriate for autocross. 923 horsepower comes out of this car. However, because it is that little bit heavier, and I think it's a little bit bigger, there's quite a lot of stability in this car. It feels big. It doesn't feel agile. It's quite difficult getting it through the corners. The brakes struggle trying to stop the huge amount of weight. However, it can deliver the power to the road. You don't find this car sort of spinning its wheels up as much. It's much easier to keep this vehicle under control as we weave between the barrels. The actual sort of changing direction can be a little bit difficult. I wasn't sure the car was going to blooming fit through the very narrow bit under the bridge, but like putting the power down out of each corner wasn't a problem. Wasn't a problem at all with this car. It get a little bit similar to the Bentley in some respects, despite the huge amounts of power, because there's perhaps that little bit more weight. There's not quite the ridiculous power to weight ratio in this car. It can use its power better than a lot of the vehicles. Yes, it will go sideways. I think all of these cars that I've used here are rear-wheel drive. It is a pretty big, heavy vehicle, and the change of direction, I thought, would slow the Rolls-Royce down. As far as the times go, well, I'm not particularly surprised to see the Formula Ford at the top of the leaderboard, despite being the lowest PI. Of course, this is Formula Ford territory, if I'm honest, a 125.9. The Fiat was the best of the silly cars, with a 127.6, still 2 seconds almost off the Formula Ford. Despite all of that power, the Fiat just can't use it. It can't change direction as quick as the Formula Ford. The most amazing result of all, though, the Rolls-Royce is in third. I did not at all see that coming. Now, to be fair to the other cars, the Rolls-Royce was the final vehicle that I drove around the track, so I would have got a bit more experienced at this particular layout, this particular autocross course. But that's pretty damn impressive. I think it's just the Wraith can use its power. It can put the power down to the road without so much wheel spinning, without so much caution almost on the throttle. And I think that's why it did as well as it did, despite being very heavy and quite difficult to get around some of the corners. The Impala, again, while that looks like quite an impressive result, I'm not hugely surprised by the Impala, as I know that car is really very, very good. The Clio V8 and the RX-7 kind of sit around in the mid-table. The V8 is a little bit twitchy. The RX-7 can be a little bit difficult on the power delivery. The Bentley GT Speed is towards the bottom. That was the first car to go. A little bit difficult at times to get that around the track. The Celica was not as bad as I feared. A little bit slidey though, so not a bad time from the Celica, but towards the bottom. And bringing up the rear, the crazy Ferrari 375. Still, it wasn't that far off. The 33.1, not that far off the Celica and the Bentley, and that was an incredibly hard car to drive around the normal tracks. So the city cars didn't do as bad at autocross as I thought they would. You know, a few of them surprised me. The Rolls-Royce was an incredible time, and the Ferrari wasn't as far off the bottom of the leaderboard as I thought it was. I did enjoy driving these cars. They were great fun. Challenge, trying to slide these around an autocross course, try and keep them in check. It is a real test of your car control, of your throttle control. I really recommend you give it a go. Build up one of these cars, put far too much power in it, and then try and get it around an autocross course. It can be infuriating. I didn't struggle too much with these though. It was good fun. I really did quite enjoy it. I would love to see sort of more autocross stuff in Forza 5, in Forza 6, in whatever Forza game. I really do enjoy it. It's a great challenge. It's a bit different. And yeah, if you haven't spent much time doing the autocross, go give it a go. It's really rather addicting. Anyway, that is it for this video, guys. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.